This class is the second class in the series of drugs which are used in the treatment of peptic ulcer. So in previous class, we have already discussed about the pathophysiology of peptic ulcer and how the various drugs are used in its treatment, and we have discussed in detail the drugs which act by inhibiting the gastric acid secretion. So with this diagram, we could summarize how gastric acid secretion take place and what are the offensive and defensive factors. So this diagram shows these are the parietal. This is the parietal cell, and on its apical membrane towards the luminal side, hydrogen, potassium, ATPs or proton pump is present, which secretes H ions into the lumen, which binds with chloride ions and form hydrochloric acid in the lumen. So this proton pump is the most important last step or the final step in acid secretion. Now we have discussed that there are multiple factors which stimulate acid secretion like histamine, gastrin and acetylcholine, and out of these three, histamine is the most important factor which stimulates acid secretion, as gastrin and acetylcholine, both of them dominantly act by stimulating the release of histamine from enterochromaffin-like cell, ECL cells. Then there are prostaglandin receptors also present on these parietal cells on the basal side. Apart from it, other receptors like receptors for histamine, for gastrin and for acetylcholine are also present here. These prostaglandins present locally, they produce a protective action, they are one of the defensive factors, and they inhibit acid secretion, as well as increasing the other protective factors, that is mucus secretion and bicarbonate secretion from the superficial epithelial cells. Mucus produces a protective layer above the epithelium, and bicarbonates neutralize the acid which is back diffusing and coming into contact with these cells. Now, apart from this, we have also discussed about the H. pylori bacteria. This bacteria is responsible for in many cases for development of ulcer, for development of gastritis, lymphoma, and has been associated even with gastric carcinoma. So we can give eradication therapy for removing this H. pylori bacteria colonization in patients of peptic ulcer. So now we progress further, and today we'll start our presentation from antacid drugs. Okay. So antacids, as the name itself indicate, that these are the drugs which antagonize the acid. So these are basically alkaline compounds which are given orally, and they neutralize the acid which is present in the gastric lumen, producing a local action and have no effect on the gastric acid secretion. ANC, that is acid neutralizing capacity. So all antacid, their potency could be defined by giving ANC. Now what is ANC? ANC is the number of milliequivalents of 1N-HCl that are brought to pH 3.5 in 15 minutes by a unit dose of antacids. So more the ANC value, more is the potency of any antacid. Now, another important factor associated with antacids is that they can cause acid rebound. All of them can cause acid rebound. What is acid rebound is, when we take antacid, there is a neutralization of acid for the time being. They are present in the gastric lumen and the symptoms are relieved, but they stimulate more and more secretion of acid as a reflex activity. Now, how it occurs that when they neutralize the acid, that increases the gastric pH more than 4. So whenever the pH of the gastric cavity increases more than 4, it stimulates reflex secretion of gastrin. So more and more gastrin is secreted, which will act by increasing the histamine release, and that will stimulate parietal cells to secrete more acid. So that is known as acid rebound. But this problem is not seen with the proton pump inhibitor or H2 blockers, though they are also increasing the gastric pH. The reason is proton pump inhibit the final step of acid secretion. So whatever gastrin secretion is occurring, that could not produce its effect because the final step has already been stopped. Similarly, with H2 blockers, they have blocked the H2 receptors. So even if gastrin secretion is increased, that gastrin is not able to stimulate histamine-induced gastric acid secretion because histamine receptors have already been blocked. So H2 blockers, proton pump inhibitor, they do not cause acid rebound, but antacids do cause acid rebound. Now, when we give antacid for empty stomach, what happens that they remain in the stomach for around 30 to 60 minutes, and that is the duration during which the patient will have relief from the symptoms. And if they are taken with meals, then it will stay in the stomach for around 2 to 3 hours. So the maximum duration for which their action will be available is up to 3 hours. Now, antacids could be categorized into systemic antacids and non-systemic antacids. Among systemic antacid, which is most commonly available, is sodium bicarbonate. It is the normal soda with powder which is present in our home and which we usually use for baking purposes and many other purposes during our cooking process. And this is a very potent antacid. It is water soluble. It immediately starts its action and it could rise the pH, gastric pH to more than 7. But there are some demerits associated with it because it is absorbed systemically, so it may cause alkalosis, systemic alkalosis. Then it produces CO2 locally in the gastric lumen, which may cause discomfort to the patient by distension or belching, or sometimes if ulcers are present, it can result into perforation of ulcer also. So that could be dangerous, but though it is very rare occurrence. Then it can cause sodium because it contains so much of sodium which could be absorbed. So that high sodium load could result into complications in patients who are already having edema or patients of congestive heart failure. Now, apart from being used as antacid, it could also be used for alkalinization of urine and to treat systemic acidosis. Then there are certain non-systemic compounds available like magnesium hydroxide, aluminum hydroxide, calcium carbonate. The advantages with them is that they are insoluble and poorly absorbed, and as a result, systemic adverse effects or systemic complications are not associated with them, as well as no acid. So if systemically they are not absorbed, there will be no acid-base disturbances like alkalosis. But usually clinically we go for a combination of antacids. We usually combine magnesium salts with the aluminum salt. So that combination is known as megaltrate. It contains magnesium hydroxide and aluminum hydroxide. Now, why do we give a combination of magnesium and aluminum salts? See, magnesium salts are fast acting, they are rapid acting, while aluminum salts produce delayed but sustained action, long duration of action. So, when we give a combination, there is rapid onset, but the effect will be sustained. Magnesium salts are having laxative effect, diarrheal effect, while aluminum salts have a constipating effect. So, both these effects cancel or counter each other. And gastric emptying is least affected when we give in combination because again magnesium salts, they increase the motility of intestine and they also fastens the gastric emptying. But aluminum hydroxide delays the gastric emptying and decreases gastric as well as intestinal motility. So when we give in combination, these two effects counter each other. And again, when we give two drugs in combination, their individual doses are decreased and therefore risk of toxicity is also decreased. Then, whenever we give antacids, particularly the non-systemic one, they decrease absorption of number of other drugs. The reason being, as they increase the gastric pH, they may produce complexes with number of other drugs, and therefore, whenever we are giving other drugs and the patient is also taking antacid, we should instruct him or her that keep a gap of at least 2 hours between antacid and any other drug. And such we have seen that these drugs do not inhibit the secretion and their duration is very short. Only the time they are present in the gastric lumen, that is maximum 3 hours, and therefore they are not able to heal the peptic ulcer. They do not have prolonged nocturnal action, so they are not used for healing or treatment of peptic ulcer. Rather, they are mainly used as over the counter drugs. Patients themselves purchase them and use them for symptomatic relief. Now we come to the another important category, that is ulcer protectors. Now, as the name itself is making it clear that these drugs are protective in nature. Rather than decreasing the acid secretion, they mainly help by protecting the gastric epithelium. Sucralfate is a very unique drug available in this category, and you can remember what it is if you understand its name itself. That is, it is a aluminium salt of sulfated sucrose. So its name is it indicates what it is, that it is an aluminium salt of sulfated sucrose, and it is having a unique action that it polymerizes at pH less than 4 into a sticky gel-like consistency and then produces a it adheres very strongly to the base of the ulcer. So it specifically to the ulcer base, it binds with the ulcer base and produce a protective layer over it. Then the surrounding proteins or the dietary proteins, they also get precipitated above it and there is a protective layer. You can see here it produces a protective layer. This blue color is sucralfate and other proteins coagulated along with it, and this protects the gastric ulcer base. It protects the ulcer from being coming into contact with the offensive factors like acid or pepsin or bile, etc. Apart from it, it also increases prostaglandin secretions, and these prostaglandins, they added to its action by increasing bicarbonates and mucus secretion. So these drugs are having, because it protects the ulcer from all the offensive factors and that promotes healing of ulcer. So their efficacy is almost similar to cimetidine and other H2 blockers, or maybe sometimes more superior to these drugs. But patient compliance is very low. The reason is that multiple doses has to be taken at least 4 times a day, and these doses has to be timely because its duration is 6 hours, the time during which it is present in the stomach. So patient has to take at least 4 timely large doses, and because of this the compliance is less, and as we have more effective and safer drugs available, though sucralfate is also safe, but because 4 doses has to be taken, and with proton pump inhibitor only a single dose is required. So patient usually prefer to take proton pump inhibitor instead of sucralfate. It has minimum side effects like sometimes it may cause constipation and nausea or dry mouth. Hypophosphatemia could be seen in some patients because this gel-like consistency, it also binds phosphate ions and that may reduce the absorption of phosphate. As I have discussed with you, that it has low patient acceptability and therefore its use has declined, but recently sucralfate use is now being considered or preferred instead of H2 blockers and PPI in prevention of stress ulcers. So what is stress ulcers? These are in patients of who are having major trauma or who are undergoing a major surgery or are admitted in intensive care units for longer duration, such patient may develop peptic ulcer due to stress. So that stress-induced peptic ulcer, to prevent them, what we do is we give, in such patient we give H2 blockers or proton pump inhibitor. But the risk with these proton pump inhibitor or H2 blockers is that they decrease the acid secretion, and as a result the gastric pH is increased. Now whenever the pH is very high, say more than 4, what happens, that continuous absence of acid, that causes bacterial colonization in the gastric lumen, that facilitates bacterial colonization in the gastric lumen, and this bacteria can then propagate to the lung and may result into development of pneumonia. So these patients who are having major stress, to them if we give sucralfate, what would be the advantage? That it will produce a protective layer over the gastric epithelium and will prevent development of stress ulcers, but it will not inhibit acid and it will not neutralize any acid. So sucralfate, and because acid will not be inhibited, so there will be no risk of bacterial colonization and no risk of development of pneumonia. Therefore, sucralfate is now being more preferred than H2 blockers or PPI for prevention of stress ulcers. One more important thing is that they should not be given along with antacids, because antacids inhibit polymerization, obviously by increasing the gastric pH, and for polymerization what we require is that gastric pH should be less than 4. Now, apart from treatment of these peptic ulcer, these drugs are also now available as topical preparation for healing of burns, bed sores, or radiation ulcers, over which they can form a protective layer. Another drug in this category is colloidal bismuth subcitrate, which is a bismuth containing compound, and this also precipitates at pH less than 4 into a glycoprotein complex which coats the gastric epithelium. Apart from this, it also increases the prostaglandin secretion, which is protective in nature, then mucus secretion as well as bicarbonate secretion. And one important action is that it could detach and kill H. pylori. So this is one of the drugs which could have action against H. pylori bacteria. But on prolonged use, there is risk of bismuth toxicity, which could result into osteodystrophy and encephalopathy. Again, as the problem that we have seen with sucralfate, that large doses, timely large doses, multiple doses has to be taken in a day. So here also at least 4 to 5 multiple doses have to be taken in a day. Then bismuth could result into blackening of the teeth and tongue. So because of this, patient acceptability is low with colloidal bismuth subcitrate, but we have to remember that this is a drug which is effective against H. pylori. This is its importance. Now we come to our last category, that is anti-H. pylori drugs, the drugs which are effective against eradication of Helicobacter pylori. So Helicobacter pylori is a gram-negative anaerobic bacteria which is able to survive under the hostile conditions of gastric lumen. We know that pH in gastric lumen is around 1 to 2, and in such acidic pH, no bacteria is able to survive except H. pylori bacteria. It attaches to the surface below the mucosa in the submucosal area, and how this bacteria is able to survive is because it is having urease activity, and thus it is able to produce ammonia, and that ammonia neutralizes any acid surrounding the bacteria. Thus it produces a neutral microenvironment around the bacteria, and thus bacteria is able to survive, and once it colonizes the gastric epithelium, it stays there for a life, and around 20 to 70% of normal persons could have this H. pylori bacteria as commensal. Now, it has been seen that H. pylori is one of the contributor in development of gastritis, peptic ulcer, gastric lymphoma, or even gastric carcinoma. So, eradication is recommended in those patients who have colonization of H. pylori and who are also having peptic ulcer. So we could go for testing for presence of H. pylori. So all patients who are positive for this H. pylori bacteria, who test positive for H. pylori, they should all be given eradication therapy. But if testing facilities are not available, then patients who have failed on routine treatment or who have relapsed after routine treatment, they should also be given this advantage of eradication therapy. But say this eradication therapy is very complex because say we have to use antibiotics, and this bacteria is such notorious that it rapidly develops resistance against antibiotics. So usually we have to give a combination of antibiotic along with acid suppressing drugs. So multiple drugs have to be given. Usually triple drug regimen or quadruple drug regimens are available, and the triple drug regimen are usually more preferred, in which we give 2 antibiotics along with 1 anti-ulcer drug. And this therapy has to be taken for at least 1 to 2 weeks. So many combinations are available, but US FDA approved most common combination is that of amoxicillin along with clarithromycin. You can see high doses being given, amoxicillin 1000 milligram with clarithromycin. These two are antibiotics and they are combined with lansoprazole, which is a proton pump inhibitor. Now all these drugs have to be taken twice daily for at least 7 to 14 days. And thus these therapies are complex, they are expensive, they are having more adverse effects and having high relapse rate and low patient compliance. Other drugs which could be used are metronidazole, tinidazole, tetracycline, and we have seen colloidal bismuth substrate. So if patient is not responding to triple drug regimen or areas where drug resistance is very prevalent, we go for quadruple drug regimen where we can also add a colloidal bismuth substrate along with antibiotics.